Almighty and eternal God, you are to us the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. Father God, today we want to thank you for all your many blessings bestowed upon us. Yes, we want to thank you for the abundance of our human and natural resources. We want to thank you, especially this day, for the creation of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Conservation Fund. We pray your blessings upon the members of the board of directors and all others who from time to time will contribute towards the effective and efficient functioning of the fund. We ask that you continue to raise up from among our people persons with the skills, knowledge, and professionalism to continue the work that we have begun. We want to thank you for the gift of generosity and charity as we bring before your throne of grace all our benefactors, local, regional, and international. We pray that you would increase their number as well as their level of generosity. More importantly, we pray that you would prosper the work of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Conservation Fund. We pray that as you prosper their work, generations to come will benefit, and not only benefit from the work that they have begun, but will continue the great work of ensuring that those natural and human resources that you have blessed us with will continue to be present on the face of the earth. We want to ask your blessings on this morning's proceedings. And as we continue this launch, we pray that you would guide our thoughts, you would guide our actions, and that everything would be to your honor and your glory. We make this prayer through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Reverend Francis, Honorable Soboto Caesar, Minister of Agriculture, Forestry, Fisheries, Rural Transformation, Industry and Labor, Honorable Camilo Gonçalves, Minister of Finance, Economic Planning and Sustainable Development and Information Technology, Honorable Robert L. Brown, Minister of Health, Wellness and the Environment, Honorable Cecil Mackey, Minister of Tourism, Sports and Culture, Mr. Raymond Ryan, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, Fisheries, Rural Transformation, Industry and Labor. Other members of Parliament who are present here, and other distinguished guests. Ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant good morning to all. And it's indeed a good morning. We are here for the official launch of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Conservation Trust Fund in such a beautiful natural setting. I could tell you, when we were looking at the venue, there were several suggestions, but the board made a wonderful choice in choosing this venue. And we all are enjoying natural beauty, and nature is at work. We are at a very important juncture today. A journey that started in 2015 I use the term we because we are a team working together to ensure the success and growth of this entity. I will take this opportunity to introduce the board or our team, our founding directors, Louise Mitchell, Laura Anthony Brown, Katrina Collis Coy. Our current board members, we have 9 board members. Myself, Michael John, who is the chair and the past president of the Lions Club St. Vincent South. Ms. Louise Mitchell, the deputy chair. She is a representative of the St. Vincent National Trust. Mr. Andrew Wilson, General Secretary, Treasurer. He's representing National Parks, Rivers and Beach Authority. Ms. Roxanne Williams from the Ministry of Health, Wellness and the Environment. Mr. Chelsea Mapp, Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning. Mr. Andrew Woodruff, representing the Chamber of Industry and Commerce. Mr. Chris Isaacs, representing the Fisheries Division of the Ministry of Agriculture. Ms. Kim Albish, representing Hotel and Tourism Management. Ms. Orisha Joseph from Sustainable Grenadines, and our CEO, Mr. Van Born Harry. As you can see, based of course on the names I just called, that we are a very strong board. The board is comprising of members from diverse backgrounds and brings a lot of skills and professionalism to the fund. Let me at this time recognize our parent body, the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, CBF, which is represented here today by the CEO, Mr. Yaba Batista. I want to thank Yabanex and his team for the tremendous hard work and support they have provided thus far to our fund. You will be hearing from him this morning. I must hasten to say that our fund has come in for high commendation with the progress so far. We are just a few months away from signing our partnership agreement. Of course, Yaba will speak to you on the partnership agreement, a very important milestone we have achieved in this fund. Mention must also be made of the contribution of the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and the various ministries who played a role in getting the fund off the ground. Let me give you an overview of the fund. The St. Vincent and the Grenadines Fund, Conservation Trust Fund, was incorporated in November 2015 as a non-profit company. The fund was established as a result of the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and several other Caribbean countries signing on to the Caribbean Challenge Initiative, CCI, in an effort to effectively conserve and manage the protected 20% near marine area by the year 2020. A profound and noble goal in an era of climate change and a need to effectively conserve and build resilience of our important coastal and marine ecosystem. Minister Gonsalves, who is present with us here today, would have represented St. Vincent and the Grenadines at the CCI meeting where St. Vincent was the first country to sign on to the Caribbean Challenge Initiative. Our mission to source and provide funding to support the activities that contribute substantially to the conservation, protection, maintenance of biodiversity in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. In keeping with our mission, the fund will administer a grant-making program with funds to support the priority areas of conservation in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Specifically to those projects that are dedicated to sustainable use of resources, protection and maintenance of biological, and also to provide funding in the rich natural resources. As a small island state, we depend on our biodiversity for economic and social development. This fund provides key resources needed to help in this area. The blue economy has been identified as the future of many. For that to happen, the fund needs to be invested in a preserving nature. We are cognizant of the need to ensure sustainable livelihood and also to protect our environment. The fund has 4 main goals. Goal 1, to protect and enhance our ecosystem, protect and enhance critical ecosystem in St. Vincent and the Grenadines against threat inclusive of pollution, unsustainable development and climate change. Strengthening the governance of the management, effectiveness of the protected area. As the country declared new protective areas in land and on sea, the fund will work with government and NGOs to strengthen the management of these protected areas. Goal 3, create responsible communities. We're going to use education to raise the awareness and to empower the citizens of St. Vincent and the Grenadines to support conservation effort. Goal 4, create sustainable livelihood. The funds providing training to persons supporting the conservation effort. As Vincentians, we all must be very proud today. Conservation is an area that is always overlooked, or it is not given the importance that it truly deserves. But today is the day when the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Conservation Fund is bringing the issue to the fore. I would like to take time out to thank the pioneers of conservation in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We are consolidating on your work and taking it to a higher level. I see persons here in the audience like Stina Holberg from the Richmond Vale Academy, persons from Action Beckway, and other NGOs, the Lions Club South, the National Trust, the Sustainable Grenadines. Thank you for your work. The fund look forward to partnering with you all and the many other communities on environmental groups as we move forward. As I said before, nature. We all hear about climate change and we experience it every day of our lives. We are losing some of our most valuable resources due to poor conservation practices. I want to zero in on something that is often ignored: the problem of plastic. Plastic has been slowly accumulating in the marine environment since 1960, to the point that we are now having huge masses of plastic floating in our oceans and other waste plastic washing up on our beautiful clean beaches around the world. It is estimated that there are 1 million pieces of plastic of varying size per square mile, with a further 8 million tons of plastic entering our oceans per year. Fish, marine mammals, seabirds are being injured and killed by plastic pollution. And it is believed that 700 species could be extinct because of it. Current estimates suggest that at least 267 species worldwide have been affected, including 84% of sea turtles species, 44% of all seabird species, and 43% of all marine mammal species. But there are probably more. Deaths are chiefly caused by the ingestion of plastic, starvation, suffocation, infection, drowning, and entanglement. Today I put to you the plastic challenge. No single use of plastic. This means you never use a plastic spoon or a plastic bag once. If you use a plastic, you must reuse it. I am also challenging you to stop the use of straws. They are unnecessary and harmful. I am using this opportunity to appeal to the stakeholders to come on board to help us to achieve the 2020 and the new goals beyond that date. Under the arrangement with the CBF, we will have to find matching funds after 2 years. We have already written to the Honorable Minister, Camilo Gonsalves, for the government support for raising the matching funds. But we cannot rely on government alone. Our corporate community can play a very big role in this area. We have to work hand in hand to save our planet. Just remember, with proper conservation practices, we can change lives. We can live healthier lives with cleaner air and more birds in the skies and less plastic in the sea. SVG can be the Costa Rica of the Caribbean. We can make ecotourism our selling point. It is still possible. We are not overdeveloped like our neighbors. Let us work to be the beacon of conservation in the Southern Caribbean. We have led the way in the turtles. Thanks to our Minister, Soboto Caesar, for leading us on this initiative. Let us continue on this path. Let's make this fund a success so that we have the resources to access the CBF funds so that we can finance conservation work that is critical. I will be meeting and counting on you for your full support. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, my dear sister. Honorable Minister of Finance, Mr. Camilo Gonzalez, and I smile because I like how you reminded him of the sent letter. And I'm certain that the letter was received and there will be action very soon. Honorable Minister of Tourism, SCMCA, Honorable Minister of Health, Luke Brown, representatives from the government agencies, and I see here CWSA, Forestry, Fisheries, National Parks, Tourism Authority, Constabulary, Mr. Lennox Bowman of GECU, our brother Batista, CEO of the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, members of the Board of Directors of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Conservation Fund, stakeholders, community-based organizations, and NGOs, and I want to specially thank our dear Reverend for an excellent prayer this morning, capturing and canvassing all the issues of nature and how humanity should interact. May God richly bless you, my dear brother. Oh, how good and pleasant it is for brothers and sisters to dwell together in unity. As I stand here this morning, I can't help in this celebration to find time to reflect, and after the reflection, I want to speak about the journey ahead. And by way of reflection, I want to recognize the hard work and dedication of our people. And when I say our people, I don't only mean Vincentians, but persons from the Caribbean, persons in the diaspora, and some persons who have made St. Vincent and the Grenadines their home, battling with issues of conservation through the years with limited resources. We need to give them a special round of applause today. I take my mind to the brothers and sisters in Sandy Bay who night after night will sleep under a coconut tree at Big Sand. Whilst we are in the luxuries, in our bedrooms fast asleep, they are preserving the future of St. Vincent and the Grenadines as it relates to our biodiversity. In reflection, this government and governments in the past have done excellent work in conservation and preservation. Recently, as was mentioned earlier, we ensured that there was a total ban on the capturing of turtles in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And I want to single out the work and dedication of my dear sister, Louise Mitchell Joseph, who assisted in championing this cause, not only in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but throughout CARICOM. I want to thank her. We continue to do great work in Union Island, and I am sorry that my dear sister from Union Island is not here. She's here? Oh, that is what a change in the hairstyle can do. I want you to stand and be recognized. Also a board member, but importantly, she's a citizen born and bred in Grenada, and she's here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. 6 years, not to take over Union Island, but to work with the people and the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and she is doing an excellent job. Not only with the mangroves, but also on the issue touching on concerning the population of bees in Union Island. Over the years, there's been an illicit growth in an industry in St. Vincent. The production of cannabis, illicit production of cannabis. And we have lost significant portions of our forest. We now have a Medicinal Cannabis Industry Act. We now have a Cannabis Amnesty Act. And we are going to make a legitimate industry out of cannabis. But we must not forget in our discussions, in our planning, and in our way forward that we have to rehabilitate those areas which were damaged. I want to underscore 2 more points. Because when we speak about the role of the government in protecting the biodiversity here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we cannot escape the fact that aerial spraying still occurs here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And during the period 2019, we are going to see this brought to an end. We are going to ensure that those persons who produce bananas and plantains, that we increase the ground crews to target these fields in particular. But in 2019, we cannot have a spray plane with all the concerns of health and other issues covering the whole country with those chemicals. It is in that same vein that I want to thank the technicians in the Ministry of Agriculture for their advice. And St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we are leading the way in the banning of all glyphosate products. You cannot bring any touchdown into St. Vincent and the Grenadines anymore. You can't bring any Roundup here or any other commodity that has traces of glyphosate. And I want to just note that this morning I was presented by the technicians in the ministry that 6 of the major orange juice brands in the world, and I won't call their names, recent testing over the last week have found extremely high levels of glyphosate. And in the upcoming weeks, we at the Ministry of Agriculture, working closely with the Bureau of Standards and the Pesticides Board, we are going to test every imported product in St. Vincent and the Grenadines coming to our shores for pesticides residue. Because we are here to speak about the environment, but we have to mention the issue of food safety. Because if we do not foster the growth of organic production here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and we impose upon ourselves these chemicals, all that we are doing here today will be an exercise in futility. I want to thank the Honorable Minister of Finance for his excellent work in ensuring that we march towards the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. And I listened quite attentively to the presentation by Michael John that we have created our own goals that will flow into these Sustainable Development Goals. I want to wish the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Conservation Fund all the very best, and to note that the government and people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we are here to partner with you in this public-private partnership needed to take the process forward. Thank you very much.
Protocol already being established. A pleasant good morning to everyone. As our lovely MC said, I am the Chief Executive Officer of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Conservation Fund. I know that the Honorable Zaboto Caesar, who just spoke before me, and our Chairman, Mr. Michael John, with their speech, would have touched on some of the issues that I was going to speak about in my speech. But I would, however, highlight some of the important aspects that I think needs to be reiterated. As was said, the SVG Conservation Fund was established in November 2015. And our general purpose is to provide a sustainable flow of funds to support the long-term management and expansion of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines national system of protected areas and other activities that contribute sustainably to the conservation, protection, and maintenance of biodiversity in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. This is truly a lovely sight this morning, and I want to again welcome you here. For those of you who do not know, we are in the heart of the South Coast Marine Conservation Area. It has a total area of 2.56 square kilometers. The South Coast Marine Conservation Area encompasses the coastal and marine areas of 3 major bays: Indian Bay, Calico Bay, and the Blue Lagoon. And it includes 5 communities: Canash, Rottermill, Calico, Rose Cottage, and Villa. It contains extensive coral reefs and seagrass habitats and is heavily exploited for its swimming, snorkeling, scuba diving, yachting, and tourism activities. Its waters are also home to a great variety of marine organisms. But along with these natural resources, the South Coast Marine Conservation Area is also home to some historical and cultural resources, which includes the Calico Fisheries Center, Fort Duvernay, and the petroglyph site at Rottermill. So it was only fitting that we would have chosen this site to have our official launch and welcome you here this morning. The SVGCF, which is the acronym for the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Conservation Fund, functions on a set of core values: transparency and integrity, cooperation and inclusivity, conservation and sustainability, accountability, and education. And as was said before by the chairman in his introductory remarks, our mission and vision are very important, as in consideration of our vision and mission, the SVGCF will work towards achieving 4 goals, which I would like to remind you of again. Goal 1, to protect and enhance critical ecosystems in St. Vincent and the Grenadines against threats inclusive of pollution, unsustainable development, and climate change. Goal 2, to strengthen the governance and management effectiveness of protected areas in St. Vincent and the Grenadines to protect critical ecosystems. Goal 3, to create responsible communities by educating, raising awareness, and empowering the citizens of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And Goal 4, to create sustainable livelihoods by providing funding for training to persons supporting conservation efforts. And these are the goals that the SVGCF would be striving to achieve moving forward. A variety of recipients in St. Vincent and the Grenadines will be eligible to receive grants from the SVGCF. Some potential recipients would include public sector agencies of the government of St. Vincent responsible for natural resource, protected areas, and biodiversity conservation. Local colleges conducting activities relevant to the vision, mission, and goals and the strategies of the SVGCF. Local or regional NGOs established, legally registered and existing in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Private corporations or other companies from relevant industries that are involved in marine or terrestrial ecosystem and biodiversity cleanup, protection, conservation, and or monitoring. Local community associations or community bodies with direct impact on marine and or terrestrial biodiversity and ecosystem resources. Other appropriate local entities of St. Vincent and the Grenadines working towards the vision, mission, and goals of the SVGCF. The SVGCF will support single grants lasting no more than 2 years, ranging from $5,000 to $50,000 US. Depending on the project outcomes, grantees may be able to apply for and receive funding for more, but only after completion of the first grant. Potential activities that the SVGCF may consider for funding are protected area management activities, education and awareness, technical support or capacity building, conservation-oriented research, equipment or tools related to biodiversity management, policy strengthening for conservation, and activities that create sustainable livelihoods. I would like us to speak a little, I would like to speak a little about protected areas and sustainable development. Protected areas are the largest deliberate land use in the world. They are found in virtually every country and on every continent. Although protected areas focus on nature conservation, most also supply a range of ecosystem services with social, cultural, and economic benefits that are essential to sustainable development. But despite this fact, persuading governments, companies, civil society, and local communities that protected areas are more than just nature conservation remains a challenge. In 2010, state signatories to the Convention on Biological Diversity met in Japan and agreed on a set of Aichi biodiversity targets, which runs to 2020. Aichi Target 11 is a global commitment specifically to increase protected area coverage to 17% of the land surface and 10% of coastal and marine areas by the year 2020. Well-governed and effectively managed protected areas are a proven method to safeguard both habitats and populations of species for delivering important ecosystem services. Particular emphasis is needed to protect critical ecosystems such as tropical coral reefs, seagrass beds, deepwater coal coral reefs, seamounts, tropical forests, peatlands, freshwater ecosystems, and coastal wetlands. And the Honorable Minister Saboto Caesar singled out Union Island, and I would like again to congratulate Sustainable Grenadines for the work they've been doing in Union Island. Additionally, there is a need to increase attention to the representativity, connectivity, and management effectiveness of protected areas. In 2015, the United Nations adopted the Sustainable Development Goals, an ambitious agenda for achieving sustainable development for our world. The SGDs, as they are commonly referred to, represent a novel commitment to eradicate poverty and hunger. The government has been doing a lot of work, as was said, regarding the Sustainable Development Goals with our Zero Hunger effort, and it is something that needs to be applauded this morning. Thank you. We are to try to take the transformative steps needed to put our world onto a sustainable and resilient path. The SGDs set 17 goals and 169 associated targets that define social, economic, and environmental sustainability as indivisible. If we in St. Vincent and the Grenadines are to walk a sustainable and resilient path, then it can only be achieved if we partner and work together with our conservation efforts to combat the effects of climate change. Conservation is everyone's business. The environment cannot be protected unless you empower the people and help them to understand its importance and that the resources are their own. Today, I am calling on you to go outdoors and into nature, to appreciate its beauty and its importance, and to take forward the call to protect the earth that we share. Globally, there is an effort to promote awareness on the importance of sustainable management of our environment and its resources with a view to ensuring a balanced and equitable use of such resources for the benefit of present and future generations. And presently, climate change is one such threat facing our world. So it is in this vein that the Svgcf joins this global initiative, being fully aware that we cannot fulfill our mission without the kindness and the generosity of our partners and donors. The message here is that corporates, private and public, must seize this moment to help conserve our environment. Millions of people today around the world are facing environmental issues that have adversely affected their lives. So in light of this, what small activities can we do today to help protect our environment? Have you mobilized your family? And I'm asking the question. Mobilize your school, community groups, or neighborhood to at least plant a tree or to clean up your immediate environment? This is the question for you this morning. And thankfully, we can help you with that this morning because we have partnered with the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Preservation Fund and the Botanical Gardens to be able to give you a lignum vitae tree so that you can plant, but not just plant, but to ensure that it survives, it grows. All this in an attempt to reintroduce and promote the sustainability of this very significant species here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. In 2017, the Preservation Fund supported the Botanical Gardens with a grant to propagate 500 sophia trees and 500 lignum vitae trees. The sophia tree, the flower of the sophia tree, as we all know, is officially recognized as the national flower of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And the lignum vitae tree is referred to as the tree of life. And it has a beautiful blue flower. But this grant came about because there was only one sophia tree at the time in 2017 in existence, and only 2 lignum vitae trees. As I understand it, the sophia trees were decimated years ago because of storms, hurricanes, and the lignum vitae trees were harvested almost to extinction. And we should applaud the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Preservation Fund for the work they have done and continue to do in the conservation of biodiversity in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Everyone has a right to clean and healthy environment. And by doing simple acts like this, planting a tree, just planting a tree, you are doing your part to protecting the earth and mitigating the effects of climate change. My appeal to us all today is not only to encourage productive discussions around environmental conservation, but I implore everyone to actively participate in the management, protection, and conservation of the environment. As individuals and corporate, we have a duty to protect and conserve the environment and ensure ecological sustainable development and prudent use of our natural resources. Remember, conservation is everyone's business. It is the little things that we do or don't do that would make a difference. Let us play our part by conserving our immediate environment, our beautiful St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and by extension, the world we live in. I thank you.
Protocol has been established. Good morning, everyone. It's really a true pleasure to be here again in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. This is probably about my 8th or 9th time that I visit your country. And I was here last week. And I must say that I have checked off the mark of one of my bucket list places in the world, going to Tobago Keys. I was able to do that last week, and it was a wonderful experience. It wasn't just wonderful because of the beauty of the area, of the crystal clear waters, and all the natural resources, the turtles, the stingrays, everything there. It was beautiful because this is what the CBF, what the St. Vincent and the Grenadines are being created for, to support the good management of places like the Grenadines, like the Tobago Keys and all the other marine protected areas and terrestrial protected areas that we have in our region. I am from Puerto Rico, and I must say that we are probably the envy of the world. Our region is just absolutely beautiful, and we need to be very proud of it. Already this morning, Mr. John talked to us a little bit about the genesis of the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, the institution I represent, and the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Conservation Fund, which goes back to the establishment of the Caribbean Challenge Initiative and those two key goals: the effective management of 20% of the near-shore ecosystems being goal number 1, and the second goal being the establishment of the financial mechanisms that are going to help the countries bring the financial resources to the table, to the ground, and to the water to achieve that 20% goal. The CBF, together with 8 national conservation trust funds, including SVGCF, we are the heart of that second goal of the Caribbean Challenge Initiative. Together we form what we call the Caribbean Sustainable Finance Architecture for Conservation. And here I am looking at Mr. Andrew Wilson here to my left. And Andrew, with your permission, I would like to paraphrase you from something you said in one of our meetings about 3 years ago in St. Lucia. Andrew said, "I can finally see the light at the end of the tunnel," when we were at our 4th CBF annual meeting. That was just shortly after SVGCF was legally established. But for me, Andrew's point was remarkable because we have actually, even before the 2015 date, we have been working together in the region since 2008 on everything related to the Caribbean Challenge Initiative and the establishment of all these trust funds, the CBF actually being created in 2012. So Andrew, I think not only now the sun is out, we're definitely out of that tunnel. We are seeing the concrete actions happening on the water and on the ground. We are seeing the financial institutions for conservation finally being established and becoming operational. The CBF, as I just mentioned, was created in 2012. We currently manage about $70 million US dollars under 2 programs. Our Conservation Finance Program, which is anchored by our endowment fund of $43 million, and a sinking fund for climate adaptation. It is under our Conservation Finance Program that we are looking forward to partner with the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Conservation Fund. Part of this fund of ours, our endowment, is earmarked to exclusively benefit St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And we are soon going to be formalizing that partnership between St. Vincent and the Grenadines Conservation Fund and the CBF. I am very glad to share with all of you here present today that the SVGCF has now met all of the eligibility criteria that are stipulated in the CBF policies and procedures for us to be able to provide funding for the grant-making program for the conservation actions that Van Bern described earlier today. I am very proud of this accomplishment, of this joint accomplishment. Once we are able to sign, and here, Michael, I don't think it's gonna be 2 months from now. I think we are on a faster track. My hope is that in less than a month, we will actually be signing that agreement. And that agreement will open that door for financing. The SVGCF would then be the 4th conservation trust fund at the national level that signs on to a partnership agreement, allowing us to hit 4 of our, like right in the middle of the mark, 4 of our 8 partnership agreements that we hope to sign before 2020 as part of the Caribbean Challenge Initiative goals. Let me also tell you a little bit about the role of us conservation trust funds. We are at the juncture of conservation, fundraising, and efficiently deploying those financial resources. And that is really an incredibly important agenda, because we need to be aware of what is going on the ground. We need to be transparent and efficient on our procedures, on the use of our resources, so that we can continue to bring more resources for our mission. Because our best fundraising strategy as conservation trust funds is to actually deliver results on the water and on the ground. If we don't get to that point of delivering those resources, we have failed. And that's why everything that Van Bern was talking about in terms of and Michael, in terms of the goals of the fund, in terms of the grant making program that you hope to build here is key. We need to put these resources really to work. At the same time, we have a key challenge in our region. We are bringing some new resources to the table here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but we know that the challenge is bigger. We actually need to bring even more resources to the table. And everyone has already talked to the fact that one of the key policies and principles of the CBF is a match contribution from the National Conservation Trust Fund here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines to the resources that we're going to bring to the table. This should not be seen as a negative challenge to overcome. This, we need to see it together as a positive challenge to overcome. We need to increase what I call our conservation finance pie. In our region and in the whole world, we keep dividing the little money that we have for environment. We keep competing among ourselves for those very finite resources. What we need to do is we need to make that pie bigger so that everyone can have more, so that we can get to do more concrete actions on the ground. And that's why I'm very happy to see today the commitment in St. Vincent and the Grenadines to go after those additional resources. And I can tell you that we, the CBF, we are here to work with you, because our success is very much dependent in your success. We are very much in a symbiotic relationship. We are here to help you with technical assistance in policy, in conservation finance, in anything that the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Fund and the country may need. You can definitely count with us in that. Just to conclude, I would like to say that for me, this journey, which I started in the CBF in 2014, but I've been working on things related to the Caribbean Challenge since 2008 as well. For me, this is really about change. Us here present today, the goals under the Caribbean Challenge Initiative, the commitments of the governments enshrined by the signature of Minister Gonzalez's Leaders Declaration on behalf of SVG during the Caribbean Challenge Initiative, all those little milestones that we are accomplishing today and that we are going to accomplish in the near future are really going to change the face of financing for conservation in our region. We are very much often troubled by the challenges we have to overcome, to establish our institutions, to come up with the right procedures, to negotiate with governments, with private sector partners. But I can assure you, going back to Andrew's quote before, there is a lot of light at the end of the tunnel. And a few years from now, I can assure you all that you will look back and you will see this event and you will see then all the work that the Svgcf is going to be doing, and you will say to yourself, indeed, we have changed the face of financing for conservation, not only in SVG in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but in our whole region. Thank you very much again for the kind invitation to have me here today. It is truly an honor to celebrate this very important milestone, and I wish all the best to the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Conservation Fund. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson, to the members of the head table, my ministerial colleagues, Ministers SCMCA and Minister Gonzalez, and we know that we had Minister Caesar with us earlier, but he has since departed, to the Board of Directors, and the Board of Directors, I should indicate, includes a representative of the Ministry of Health, Wellness and the Environment, and specially invited guests. It is a great pleasure for me to be able to meet with you this morning in this setting, this beautiful setting. It's called Paradise, and as you would no doubt realize, it is a paradise that needs to be conserved. I think it is unnecessary for me to indicate that the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines wholeheartedly supports this activity and wholeheartedly supports the establishment of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Conservation Fund. That is amply demonstrated already by the presence of several ministers of government here. And I could see that there's already a very close working relationship between these ministers and ministries and the fund. Because, for instance, I heard the Chief Executive Officer in his remarks saying that conservation is everybody's business. And I thought that he may have taken his cue from the Minister and Ministry of Tourism, Sports and Culture. They say slightly differently that tourism is everybody's business. In the Ministry of Health, we say that health is a shared responsibility, and equally conservation is a shared responsibility. That's why it's so important and relevant that we've been able to gather here underneath the tents at the seaside, this great collection of stakeholders, no doubt of the same mind and of the same interest, that interest being making sure that we could protect the St. Vincent and the Grenadines for the benefits of future generations. Now, I'd like to commend the organization, the Conservation Fund, for being able to take the steps that were required for it to be able to access funding from the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund. And I think that requires a round of applause. They took all the necessary steps, starting back in 2015, in late 2015, when the fund was registered as a non-profit entity. Since then, there has been progression, there has been evolution, a board has been appointed, the bylaws were put in place, a CEO was appointed recently in December, and who has given a good account of himself this morning. And as you might say, the fund is good to go and ready to access this financing. I want it to be established that we support the vision, the mission, the goals and the objectives of this fund, and the strategies as well that have been enumerated. Now, I looked at the goals as they have been expressed in some of the material of the fund, and I wanted to just zero in particularly on one of these goals which I find to be particularly salient and relevant, and that is goal number 1. It says to protect and enhance ecosystems, and in its elaboration it goes on to say that we have to protect and enhance critical ecosystems in St. Vincent and the Grenadines against threats including or inclusive of the threat of pollution, the threat of unsustainable development, and the threat of climate change. I think that the fact that you could elaborate these particular goals and the fact that they compare or they mesh with the goals of the government so well means that this fund is a natural partner of the state in that bid or push for sustainable development and the attainment of critical national goals. And I wanted to give a sense of the situation as far as some of these goals are concerned. We take, for instance, the threat of pollution, and the policy of the government as reflected in our actions is one that serves to minimize pollution to the extent possible. We have done this in several ways. We've already heard comments about the ban on styrofoam which was put in place, and I think that that was a very progressive step by the state. We put ourselves in a leadership position compared to other countries of the Caribbean, and I am sure that they will follow that great example. But that wasn't all. Right now, and there's been discussion about the need for us to move further along the road of restricting plastics, and in particular, single-use plastics. The government has already supported initiatives along this line, and we are moving earnestly in that direction. And with prompting from our partner, as we have established, I'm sure that we will get to that destination in quicker time. So we will look forward to the partnership for that goal. Now, one of the other areas, and it is an area that we must pay particular attention in the context of our times, has to do with dealing with the threat of unsustainable development. Now, sustainable development took on new meaning and a life of its own since the creation of the Sustainable Development Goals. And it is a term that is often bandied about. And I wanted us to go back to perhaps the origin of the expression so we could get a clear sense of what sustainable development really means. And this term, which is so popular right now, became first used, or is traced or can be traced back to around 1980, when it was articulated in the World Conservation Strategy. Conservation. You see how that word underpins what we're doing today and even the origin of the term sustainable development. Sustainable development, as it was defined then, had to do with development that meets the needs of current and future generations without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. That is a definition which was offered in 1987 by the World Commission on Environment and Development. And we know that a very important component or facet of sustainable development has to do with environmental management. And if our actions, so when we consider the definition that has just been read, we recognize that if by our actions we are contributing to an erosion or to erosion on the beaches that we so love and so enjoy, then we are not contributing to sustainable development. Then that will be unsustainable development, the very kind of thing that this fund was established to mitigate against. And it's not just a matter of our actions. It could also be something due to climate change. Climate change, we know, causes rising sea levels, and as a result of rising sea levels, we might have a reduction in our shorelines. How are we going to mitigate that? Because when that happens, it means that we do something which is not consistent with sustainable development, because we do not transmit our environment in a way that would allow future generations to meet their own needs. And biodiversity is a critical component. The Minister of Agriculture spoke about what we did with respect to turtles. And there's also another initiative concerning our conservation and concerning our promotion of biodiversity that has to do with our parrots. We embarked in arrangements that allowed our parrots to be protected, and we are the beneficiary of these arrangements. And why is this necessary? It is necessary because given our condition of life here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, where we are exposed to the threat or possibility of a volcanic eruption, for instance, which could wipe out our parrot species. Given the fact that in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we are in what you might call a hurricane or a storm zone, and one bad hurricane or storm could cause all our parrot population to disappear. So we're taking steps to mitigate against that. We're taking steps to prevent that. And it brings us another point I want to make concerning sustainable development, again, because it's important for us to bring it to articulate it in a way that can be appreciated by the broadest possible audience. And our actions, as simple as they may be, like cutting down trees without ensuring that they are replanted, could mean that sufficient trees are not left to meet the needs of current and future generations. I think that the matter of sustainable development is tied into the other strand of the goal for this St. Vincent and the Grenadines Climate Fund, which has to do with climate change. Because climate change has several undesirable effects, including a greater frequency and intensity of hurricanes and extreme weather events. Those are things that we should mitigate against. Those are things that threaten our way of life, and which I'm sure the work of this fund would help us to limit. The values of the organization. So we have a sense of what this organization hopes to achieve, its goals, and the way in which these goals relate to the goals of the government itself. But it's one thing for you to want to go about doing something, and it's another thing for you to go about doing it in the right way. And that's why I think the values of this entity, which have been articulated, are important for reflection. Because these values will characterize the job that it does, and also inform its ability to access greater funding from which we could benefit. And these values I'd just like to close by commending to you as being very useful. Transparency and integrity. So we're going to achieve our goals of addressing sustainable development issues, our goals of dealing with pollution, our goals of taking action in relation to climate change, and we're going to do this in a transparent way and with integrity. We're going to emphasize, or the fund proposes to emphasize, cooperation and inclusivity. Very important. Conservation, as you would imagine, being at its heart, and sustainability, accountability, and education. These are outstanding values, and therefore we commend this St. Vincent and the Grenadines Conservation Fund for its mission, its goals, and its values, and assure it of support from the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, including the Minister of Finance. Thank you very much.
Good morning. I was just here for the Lignum Vitae plant. I didn't know that I was going to be speaking, but since everybody was promising money on behalf of the Ministry of Finance, I think they wanted to put me on the spot. I'd like to recognize everyone at the head table. Louise Mitchell, who was mentioned as a board member but hasn't been appropriately recognized for her strong environmental advocacy across St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and is a driving force really in that regard. My parish priest, Reverend Francis, the head of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Tourism Authority, Glen Beach, and everyone else. We're here at the South Coast, which is supposed to be a protected area. Those of you with a long enough memory will know that before planes landed in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, they landed on the sea. But in order for them to do that, they blew a hole in the coral reef that exists right over here. And those of you with a long memory, but maybe not that long, will know that when you were young boys and girls, you could play football and cricket on this beach. But there's hardly enough sand to lie on these days, much less to play football and cricket. When I was younger, you didn't need a boardwalk to get from Aquatic Club onto the beach because there was sand there. And there wasn't a dock coming off of the Aquatic Club that ran through the ground instead of arching over it, which naturally blocks the sand from coming in the direction that the water is running and prohibits accretion and replenishment of the beach. So we're in a protected area, but it's an area that's scarred. It's scarred by our activities. And we're here at Paradise Beach Hotel. And if you look at the wall behind you, you'll see that some of it is stone and some of it is block. It's because the Halbishes just had to replace that wall because the encroaching waters took it away just a few weeks ago. And like I said, when I was younger, there was sand there. You know, the water wasn't hitting against the wall. This is an area under threat, as is much of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And as much as we appreciate the beauty of this area, we have to appreciate the fact that it is a threatened area. Our friends in Susgren know very much the threats in the southern Grenadines. I know that Action Beckway is here, and they know the threats in the northern Grenadines. We are in crisis in terms of the protection and sanctity of our environment and our ecosystems. And the first thing we have to do is recognize and acknowledge that and realize that there's now is a time for urgent action. St. Vincent and the Grenadines is blessed in that it has many ecosystems, and I mention ecosystems because the Conservation Fund has an emphasis on ecosystems, which I think is very appropriate. We have mountain ecosystems, which are under threat, and the Honorable Minister of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries mentioned the cannabis industry. One of the major arguments in favor of establishing the cannabis industry was how can we get people out of the hills and out of the forest where they're cutting trees down to plant marijuana. So even in those industrial commercial decisions, there was an environmental argument that was very persuasive. But we have a forest ecosystem that is under threat by both climate change and human activity. And we have species like the St. Vincent parrot whose habitat is threatened by those activities. We have river ecosystems that are under threat because of where we build our houses and how we use the rivers to dispose of our waste and other things. We have marine ecosystems, both coastal and in coral reefs, that are under threat from climate change and from human activity. We have hotels, not this one, so I'm not knocking, but we have hotels that dispose of grey water simply by pouring it into the sea because the sea is large and abundant and the sea will take it away. All of these ecosystems that we're blessed to have in St. Vincent and the Grenadines are threatened. And the difficulty of having a diversity of ecosystems in a small country is that you can't just set aside increasing areas to say, well, leave that area alone, that's a protected area, we'll damage the rest. The large countries can do that. The United States can have a whole network of national parks, and you can go there and gaze in awe and wonder at the beauty and splendor of these things. We're a small country, and every developmental decision that we make has an ecological implication. And we have to try to, as best as possible, develop this country while not making decisions like blowing a hole in a reef or building a dock across the sand that makes sense in the short term but have lasting environmental and ecological implications. So I think it's very important that we recognize the crisis, recognize the urgency, recognize the need for action, and therefore recognize the very important role that the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Conservation Fund can play in protecting St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The government has been doing, as Minister Brown indicated, he's the Minister of the Environment, a lot of work on its part to try to further the conservation effort. I want to recognize very specially Minister Brown in his capacity as the Minister of Environment, and Minister Caesar, who has responsibility for forestry and fisheries, for their advocacy within the government that has led to the ban on styrofoam, the ban on turtle hunting, the limitations on certain whaling activity, and now the ban on sand mining that is now protecting the beaches at Brighton and Diamond. Of course, there's more work to be done in the sand mining space. But I thank them for their advocacy and for moving us in that progressive direction. This year, we plan to work on the issue of grey water that I just mentioned and single-use plastic bags. It was easier to ban styrofoam because nobody in St. Vincent and the Grenadines makes styrofoam. We have plastic bag manufacturers in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. There are employment issues. We've spent the last year trying to resolve some of those issues. And we expect this year to move on plastic bags, to move on grey water, and to move, I see a veteran diver in the audience, and to move on reef-safe sunscreen, because there are some sunscreens that damage coral reefs and some that don't. And we hope to ban the harmful sunscreens and work with the tourism industry to ensure that they educate their guests about the impacts of some of the sunscreen they may bring in their suitcases when they come from overseas. That is, those are the headline areas of the government trying to move the envelope in 2019 environmentally. What we need more now is advocacy and education from the fund and from people like you here today. It shouldn't be that the government is the major player in environmental protection and advocacy. It doesn't happen in most places. Normally it's the NGOs, it's the public, it's the private sector even that drag the government into ever more progressive areas of conservation. And we're hoping that the fund, which has an educational mandate as well, does its part to pressure the government, but to also mainstream the idea of conservation throughout St. Vincent and the Grenadines, so that you can also move the government and move yourselves in your homes and your communities in the area of conservation. I want to specifically mention the business sector. The business sector in St. Vincent and the Grenadines has generally stood askance from the issue of environmental protection and conservation. It cannot continue like that. The Chamber of Commerce is here. I want to urge them to educate their members on the issue of environmental protection and conservation. I see representatives of the financial sector that are here. Your business can't simply be judged on your profits and your losses. You have to have an assessment of your social responsibilities and your environmental responsibilities, particularly in a country that is as threatened environmentally as St. Vincent and the Grenadines. This is a fund that we're launching here, which means it needs money, and it needs money not only from our friends in Germany and the World Bank and the Ministry of Finance, but they need money from you. They need money from the business sector to also contribute to do the very good work that they hope to do. And I hope that we can have we can say that we have a fund that's not just funded by Germans and the World Bank, but it's also funded by Vincentians. I think that would be a useful thing in our own work. This fund has been in existence on paper since 2015. This is a launching. We expect them to act with urgency. We expect them to do a lot of advocacy work. We expect that sometimes their initiatives and mandates will butt heads with the government's more pressing and urgent needs. But that is okay as well, because we need that advocacy and that push to drive us forward, to protect and to preserve this beautiful country that we have. We have an anthem that somebody convinced me the other day was an environmental anthem, because it starts with St. Vincent Land So Beautiful, then it talks about the high green mountains, then it goes down to the seas and the beaches in the final verse. If we don't do anything, our children and grandchildren will ask us when we're singing the anthem, what are we talking about? Because they won't recognize any of those things in what we leave to them. We have incredible blessings here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. They're not going to stay here with us unless we do something to preserve them. And I think that the fund is coming at the right time to join this frontline fight to protect St. Vincent and the Grenadines, our incredible gifts, and to preserve it for generations going forward. So I want to thank them for their incredible work. I want to thank them for inviting me here today, and hope that we can get past the speeches and get to some action as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Firstly, I would like to thank Canon Ashton Francis, the rector of St. Paul's and St. John's Anglican Churches, for bringing us your word of prayer today. Thank you. I would also like to thank Rodney Small for his amazing music and his wonderful rendition of the national anthem. We are indeed grateful to the CBF secretarial support over the years. Mr. Yabanes Batista, who is here with us, he literally held our hand every step of the way to make this possible. Yaba, I would also like you to pass on our thanks to Karen McDonald-Gale, who also gave us a lot of tremendous support. We are indeed grateful to the support of the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The approval was granted by Cabinet on the 27th of May 2015 for the establishment of this fund. And we would like to say that we are so heartened and pleased to see 4 ministers of government here today endorsing and giving us further support. We are honored and really grateful for their presence. We would like to thank the major donors to the fund, which are the German Development Bank, the Nature Conservancy, and the GEF through the World Bank. Now, Minister Luke Brown spoke about transparency, so in that light, I would like to also mention that we're expecting that the first tranche of funds will be in the range of about $165,000 US, and in the second year we may get a similar amount, and in order to access the remaining funds, we have to raise matching funds. And I believe the amount of funds actually allocated to St. Vincent right now, it's about $4.65 million. There's one person here who I believe has worked harder than anybody else in getting this conservation fund established, and his name is Mr. Andrew Wilson. I would like him to just step forward a bit and take a little bow. Mr. Andrew Wilson is the CEO of National Parks, Rivers and Beaches Authority, and it is Andrew's hard work and dedication, as well as the work of his staff, as well as his chairman, Mr. Gideon Nash, that really gave the initial support for this fund to be set up in terms of using their offices and resources. We're very grateful to you. I would also like to mention it was Mrs. Euchrista Bruce Lyle who drafted the bylaws, so we'd like to thank her for being involved in the early days. I would like to thank the members of our board, our very able chair, Mr. Michael John, Mr. Andrew Wilson, the Secretary Treasurer, Mr. Richard Joseph, Mr. Trelson Mapp, Ms. Kim Halbish, Ms. Roxanne Williams, and Mr. Andrew Woodruff, who we know as the other Andrew. I would now like to thank some of our speakers. I would like to thank Honorable Minister Caesar for his excellent address and the wonderful news he brought us today about the ban to aerial spraying. and also the attention on food safety that his ministry is going to be placing. I would like to thank Honorable Minister Luke Brown, the Minister of the Environment, for his words on sustainable development and the importance of this. I would also like to thank Honorable Camilo Gonsalves for his speech here today. As impromptu as it was excellent. Thank you for recognizing the threats facing St. Vincent and the Grenadines. It is always so heartwarming when we hear a policymaker really articulate that he understands the threats to the environment. Thank you very much, Minister Gonsalves. We expect great things from you in terms of following up on helping to ensure that those threats are mitigated. I would like to also thank Minister SCMCA for being here today and for your presence. We would like to thank Ms. Kim Halbish and Paradise Hotel because they have volunteered themselves over the years to be the place where we have board meetings and to have this launch. So thank you very, very much for being there. So I believe that in the establishment of the Conservation Fund, we are in St. Vincent, as they say, standing on the shoulders of giants. The giants that we're standing on are the people who have been toiling in the fields of conservation over the years. And I would now just like to recognize some of you for the great work you've done. Firstly, I'd like to ask Ms. Vonnie Rudette of Hand to Earth to stand up. She's done a lot of tremendous work in natural farming. I would like to invite Laverne Bendick Phillips and Mr. Morrison Bazin of the National Trust to stand up so that we recognize the work of the National Trust. I believe that Union Island is the beacon of the entire Grenadines, surpassing Bequia and everywhere else in the area of conservation. Orisha Joseph and Suskran, thank you for your amazing work. Alicia Lavia, Monica and David Harper, I'd like to recognize you. Please stand up from Action Bequia for the amazing work that you've been doing in conservation in Bequia, particularly in the area of recycling. You are a model for the rest of the country. Thank you. I would like to recognize Stina Herberg from the Richmond Vale Academy for the amazing work that you've been doing over the years in all of the different areas of the environment, most recently helping to propagate 6,000 soursop trees to help the government with its $1 million planting drive. I would also like to mention a couple other organizations. There have been over the years that have really helped build up conservation in St. Vincent that are no longer so active, like the GEMS organization. I think they did a lot of work in the early days. I also want to recognize Vaughn Martin from Serenity Dive. He's doing a lot to teach our young people about the beauty of the environment. And to the head of another trust fund here is Mrs. Malcolm from the Mustique Charitable Trust. Thank you to the MCT for doing a lot of amazing work, not specifically only in the area of the environment, but throughout St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And we're hoping that we'd be able to partner with organizations like the trust as we seek to raise the funds that are necessary. And lastly, I would like to thank the media for your presence here today. We rely on you to spread the word on conservation and to help us bring the message to every person in St. Vincent and the Grenadines that conservation begins with each one of us. So thank you for your presence here today, and I hope you will continue to support and follow the work of the Conservation Fund. Without further ado, please, before you leave, join us for some snacks, and also join us in making sure you take home with you a tree of life. It will help you get longer life if you plant it, I assure you.